Welcome back to the Prowl Podcast. This is Trevor Grice, and I'm here with my wife,
Diana Stevens.
And we're here today for episode 9, which we are going to be titling The Car Ride Home. We'll get to that in just a second, but I want to give some updates on Caro sports lately. We'll start off with golf. Girls golf has been playing multiple matches, and from what we can gather, every single week they're getting better, and the scores are getting lower. And while they do have a win there, there's sometimes where they haven't won, but every week they're getting better, and that's what coach has identified. And a shout out to Melina DeWald, who broke 50 for the first time. And I know that's always a big deal. When I did it for the first time when I was like 30-something, it was a big deal. So
Yeah.
Shout out to Melina. Swim is 2-1. With wins versus Elma and Alpina and a loss versus Garber. And a shout out to Cheyenne Wicks as the Advertiser Player of the Week this week, right?
This week, yep. Just this past Wednesday.
Awesome. We got boys soccer. We just had a match last night. They are 6-2, 4-2 in the league. And this week was a big week. They mercied Memphis at home 8-0, and then last night was Birch Run Panthers 9-1. So lots of goals there, but I think the biggest thing I need to shout out is just the defense, right? I mean, the ball is on the offensive side of the field most of the time, and they don't always get the love because they're not in the stat sheet, but some of those guys are doing a fantastic job there in the back. Football. So tonight, big game at home versus Lakers. By the time you see this, that game, or listen to this game will be over with. So hopefully it'll be a big win for the Tigers. But they did have a big win last week versus Vassar. Tale of two halves, I'd call it. Vassar led at halftime 7-0 in Vassar, and then I believe it was 34 unanswered points by the Tigers in the second half, which was fantastic to see. So, they're learning the system, they're learning the schemes, and it's definitely coming together. And I know I'm excited to head out to the game tonight.
With football, do you want to give a shout out to a few players that were highlighted by the Advertiser?
Yeah, so I think leading the area in tackles is Jaden Buniak, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, he had 50, I believe.
Yeah, and he had a 21 tackle performance versus Cass City. Even though the game didn't go well for the Tigers, he had a phenomenal game. Logan McGarry's on there for rushing, somewhere in the middle. I know our freshman tandem in the defensive backfield, Aiden Savage and Mark Warren, are in the leaderboard for interceptions, I think 3 apiece.
And Wyatt Waterman was also listed for tackles as well.
He was, yes. I do remember that. He actually had a really good game versus Vassar as well. So they're 2-2 going into tonight's matchup versus Elkton Pigeon Bayport Lakers. JV is, I know they have one win. They had a big win versus Memphis. And I know some of the other games they've had have been, we'll call learning experiences. And I think that's that's the best way to put it, right? They're learning a new system as Coach McDaniel's really looking at making the system all the way down to the middle school level. And at the same point, they're missing some of their key players because they got pulled up to varsity,
Yes.
And so that's always tough. I know our kids have had that when like the guy they rely on is now on a different team. It feels like you're missing a piece, and that can happen. And then shout out to middle school football, who won 28-0 this week against Bad Axe, I believe.
Yes.
Yep. So, and then cross country, we have 3 girls in the top 10 on the Advertiser, which is pretty cool. And we have 2 boys in the top 5. I know Luke Heron is a freshman. He was a player of the week for the Advertiser at one point. And then they got a big match this weekend as well. Cadillac, maybe? I'm actually forgetting where it was. So look for the results on that. And then volleyball, I know they had a quad in Marlette to begin the year and beat North Huron there. And they've had some league games versus USA where they lost. And then they had a kind of an epic match with Vassar where they were leading through it and then kind of let it slip away at the end. So shout out to the volleyball girls. And
they've had a few more games too that we don't actually have results on, so that's kind of on me. I haven't made a contact there, so if somebody has a way to get us some volleyball information or put us in touch with the coach so that we can get more information for volleyball, we would appreciate it.
Yeah, that's what happens when you only work at the school part-time, right?
Right.
And running our own kids around, because as you guys,
Volleyball is the same night as soccer. It just is. They tend to be Tuesdays and Thursdays, so it makes it rough.
we never promised this wasn't going to be a somewhat biased situation, right? So yes, soccer gets all these videos and all these clips because we're there, right?
Yeah, and if I'm going to be honest, though, I'd rather watch volleyball.
Yeah.
So,
but we're going to talk about later in our episode 9 of why you're at the soccer games. Okay. So, and then I think that about covers it. Other than I want to give a shout out to the cheerleaders who have been at every varsity football game, doing a fantastic job. Consistent at the beginning, consistent at the end. I know we sometimes ignore those, but ignore them. But I haven't. I just not only do I know some of the parents, and they're very supportive of them. Some people don't realize that we went without cheerleaders for a very long time, actually. And so to have
and a lot of other schools don't have cheerleaders.
Correct.
Like we have a really strong cheer program right now. And one thing that I thought about, and luckily, it seems like we're, heading in the right direction to turn things around with our football program. But you think about how hard it is as a football player if you're part of a losing program and you're like losing week after week. Well, I've never really thought about how difficult that must be as a cheerleader too. Like if your team is just like losing by a ton and you're out there like doing your cheers and trying to get everybody fired up, like that's not an easy thing to do. It can't be.
No, it definitely can't be. But they're an important part of actually bringing that spirit. I mean, you wouldn't think so, but there's just a different energy, when they're there. And where that was really shown was in those regional basketball games that were held at Stamey's Gymnasium last year that we hosted with Hamady versus Saginaw High. Like,
and their cheerleaders like really got into
they were
it.
epic cheerleading squads. and I was like, what? I had to stand next to them, and like their use of the ground pound, like stomping as part of, like it was phenomenal. It really was. It was quite an energy and an ambiance. So we need to remember how important cheerleaders can be for these events. So shout out to them. All right. Well, going on to episode 9, we call it the car ride home. Now I want to take this moment and shout out Diana because while some of you don't know, she has actually another podcast, which is kind of on hiatus at this point.
It's not on hiatus. It's just we don't post quite as regularly as we used to.
So Diana and her friend Stephanie Malley started Moms in Baseball, which is at how many episodes now?
105-ish.
100 plus, I know that.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what it says it is, except it goes into some topics a little bit deeper and had some pretty cool interviews throughout the way. And one that stands out, to us, and actually has been in a couple different episodes, was this idea of parents and the impact on your children, mostly younger ones, but in terms of what you talked about, but also, we're talking like our high school age kids, and something like the car ride home or things around that. And so why don't you kind of talk a little bit about what you guys discussed in that?
Sure. So like you said, we talked about more than just the car ride home, but we actually sent out a survey, and we surveyed several kids. I don't remember the exact age, but I want to say between ages of like 10 to 16 or so. And we tried to keep it very simple so that they would, fill it out completely and we could learn some information from that. And so we talked about things like, what are things parents, either your parents or other parents, say at a game, that bothers you or that you wish they wouldn't say. And we asked them about the car ride home and what are things, that you wish your parents wouldn't do. Basically, just we tried to give them an out because sometimes kids don't want to tell us directly if they don't like something. And it was very much geared towards baseball because I remember a lot of the kids saying they don't like it when when they hear parents yell from the stands, just throw strikes. But I think that same advice could be incorporated in all sports. Like, don't shout out obvious things, that the kids already know. That's not helpful to anybody, and it's very discouraging to them. And I haven't listened. This was episode 71 of Moms in Baseball, so it was probably a couple of years ago when we recorded that. I don't remember the specifics. I haven't gone back and listened to it really, but I just remember it was interesting what the kids talked to us about. And we also briefly covered it in episode 59. We talked with a mental performance expert, and we just kind of asked him his opinion on what do you think about, the car ride home and that impact. And I can't remember if he said this in the recording or off recording, but I do remember him telling us that studies have shown that that's the number one reason why kids leave a sport. Meaning, like, you used to play baseball, you used to play youth football or whatever, and they got really discouraged from having to put up with that car ride home with mom or dad, telling them everything that they did it wrong. And usually it's, I think as a parent, we're coming from like a really positive, like it's coming from a good place. You notice what you think they could do better and you're just trying to share that with them. But kids don't take it that way. And I think we understand that because even now as adults, we don't really appreciate, your parents giving you feedback on how they think you could raise your kids better or how you could do something better. So we tend not to be real receptive to that. And so that part stuck with me, that's the number one reason why kids leave sports. So just something to think about.
So why we're bringing this up, and our goal is to not get too preachy here. We do not know everything. We're raising two kids who are 13 and 15. 14.
They're 14 and 15.
14 and 15 for this period of time. Soon they'll be 14 and 16. And it's something we do talk about. And we talk about with them. And so the thing here is that if I'm going to come at this from what I do during the day, which is a psychologist, the why we do this comes down to our own anxieties as parents. Like, one thing we have to acknowledge is our time is done, right? And so oftentimes the worst culprits of this type of behavior are the parents that played that actual sport. And they probably do know, or at the very least think they know. And yet that's not what your kids want to hear from you. And they're hearing it from their coach, and that's more than a good enough place. And then it's our own anxiety because we want them to succeed. Because sometimes we take their failures a little too personal. Like last night, our kid was in the goal, ball slipped through. He stopped it before it went through, but barely. But that would not have been a great goal for him, And the thing is like, we as parents, yeah, maybe if that would have happened, we would have been embarrassed. But how do you think he feels? Like, he doesn't need us to make it worse.
Right.
He
doesn't need us to remind him, like, to try catching the ball next time and not letting it slip through.
Hey, when that ball comes in the goal, you're supposed to stop it, which is the equivalent of just throw strikes on the baseball field. And actually, shout out to our oldest, Xander, because he is vocal with that. I mean, this is completely off topic, but he gets done with his game and he comes and tells us he has beef with us. Like, he has no problem telling us when he's got issues with us. And actually, I very much appreciate that. And where that showed last year was during baseball. I was helping coach, and I said something once in the whole season during an at bat, and he let me have it afterwards. I mean, as much as
you were seeing it more as a dad than as a coach.
Yep, I definitely went dad mode instead of coach mode, and we had an agreement that if I was going to coach, I was going to be hands off. And we talked a lot, but it was on his doing. He'd come to me and ask, and so in that one time during his at bat, and I think that shouts out the difference between sports, right? So like tonight is going to be the Caro football game, right? And if you're up in the stands and you're screaming your bloody head off, is your kid on the field going to hear you?
No.
Most likely not. And if they do, they can say, that's my mom's voice. I understand that pitch, but I have no understanding what the words are.
Yeah,
right?
I can't imagine they could hear.
So what you say and do at a football game or something like that isn't really going to be that impactful. What you do after probably will be, as opposed to a game of focus, which, could be, or where you're closer, like maybe a volleyball game, definitely a baseball and a softball game, where these moments where focus has to happen. And you got to remember, your kids are tuned into your voice. Like, they will tell you they didn't hear you, and they're lying, because they will hear you, especially if it's something they didn't appreciate or they're annoyed by. And I think that's what Diana and Stephanie's questionnaire kind of showed, right? Mm-hmm. Even at the game or on the car ride home. And so, if we look at the being at the games and what you can do on this car ride home, if we're actually going to answer the question of, well, how do I do that? Sometimes not even bringing up the game. Sometimes letting it just go is what we can do. I mean, do you have other ideas?
Okay, so this is something else I remember our mental performance expert mentioning, and he thought it was important that kids know, they basically, like, you enjoyed watching them play, and your opinion of your child doesn't change whatsoever based on their performance of the game. And with that in mind, he thought you should have the same routine basically no matter how the game went. So afterward, like either just not talking about it at all or saying like, hey, I had fun watching you play today, or just something very simple because if they get in the car and you make a huge deal about like, oh my gosh, you had such a great game today, blah, 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 and you just really go on about that. And then the next time they have a horrible game and then they get in the car and then you say absolutely nothing at all, or you berate them, then they feel like they're somehow less that game than the one before. So first of all, when our kids were younger, I used to constantly use like, oh, I had so much fun watching you play today. But like, if our soon-to-be 16-year-old is playing a baseball game and goes 0 for 3 and strikes out 3 times and makes 2 errors in the field, and he gets in the car and I say, I had a blast watching you play today, I don't think he's going to appreciate that, So I think you kind of have to just, like, know your audience. But what I do, and maybe this is horrible, but I usually just say, like, especially if they had a bad game, like, okay, where do you want to go for dinner? Like, where are we gonna go get some food and like move on with our day? And if they had a really good game and they're excited to talk, because if they do have a really good game, our kids usually want to talk about it. They bring it up, and then you can, and then we talk about it.
So I think Xander and I had kind of a pattern after our baseball games, because we were pretty much always riding together. Sometimes home games he would go with you. And then you have him during the summer, and I had Max during the summer. But I think kind of my standard go-to is we get in the car and, okay. And then I might be just like, well, thoughts? And sometimes there's thoughts, sometimes there's not. And Xander is classic for, is like, well, maybe I'll hit the ball next time. Like he'll make an obvious statement because he'd be pretty humorous about it. And then his next statement will be, what are we getting for food? It's usually always his second statement. And when he has a good game, he is much more animated, right? And I think all kids are, and they want to, and we're going to talk a little bit about like what if you're not there and what we can do with that. But I think that consistency in that plan, our kids do know we're not going to talk about stuff that doesn't need to be talked about. I think we've made that pretty clear in our pattern. Like they're not going to have to talk about something right after a game. And if they say no, if they go, then the next question is, what do you want for food? So
yeah, where's our next stop type of thing. Yeah, just move on.
And yet you brought up the good point about who we're talking to now. Like some of you aren't even driving your kids home anymore.
Right. Or the car ride home might be 2 minutes, or you're not giving them a ride. They're riding them, they're giving themselves a ride home. But still, like when you see them for the first time after the game, I don't think any kid wants to hear about everything that they did wrong. Like I feel like that's probably a coaching thing. They're all in high school now. If there's something that needs to be coached, I'm sure the coach can do that. If they want your advice about something because they're actually going to listen and respect that, then I'm sure that they'll ask, and that has happened. I've seen that with our own kids a couple of times where they've said like, well, is there something else I should have done there? Did I make the right play? Like if they want to know, they'll ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we also have to acknowledge that sometimes your kid is there to have fun and play, and that's it. And when the game's over with, they're done with it too, and they want to just let it go, good, bad, or indifferent, right? Because, this is sometimes our conversations are stuck on like travel ball, which is kind of like it's like there's a lot of, what do I want to say? Use the right words here. There's a lot of high emotions and focus on that. But in high school sports, a lot of times the kids are there to have a good time and do their best, right? And if they,
as they should be,
absolutely. And so while this was titled, the car ride home, there's some other aspects, right? And I think one of the things I want to shout out is all of you parents that go. And we know that not every parent can go to every game. Like that, life is life, right? Some people are single parents, some people have jobs, and we'll talk.
Or lots of kids.
And can't just go. So, and we'll touch on that in just a second. But never underestimate the importance of being at your kid's game. Like they will tell you it doesn't matter, and they are lying, right? Because, and I know as a parent, we're always afraid of, well, what if this is the one game win, and that happened last night for the second time to that one parent, right? So.
Oh, it did. But yeah, but might as well just talk about it because, So do you think it matters if I say his name?
No,
I don't think they'll care. So Ramon Zamora scored his first soccer goal, his first varsity soccer goal last night, and his parents weren't there. And his parents go to everything, but they have 3 kids, and 2 other kids had to be in other places. And this was a late scheduled game, like it wasn't originally on the calendar. And
it was home.
And it was a home game. It was added late, so they took their kids to the other cities where they needed to be. So they missed his first goal. And I'm sure that they were incredibly bummed about that. And I had texted Ramon's mom and said, hey, he scored a goal. And she was like, wow, I missed his first ever home run. And now I missed his first goal. But the flip side of that is obviously we can't be at everything. I know for a fact Ramon completely understands why his parents couldn't be there. But I think there's this huge excitement that kids get to some degree. Like the couple of times I've missed things or I've seen Trevor miss things, I see like our kids get really excited to tell you about it. So sometimes I feel like if they know you weren't there for a good reason or whatever, they're really excited to just share that experience. So, ask him or her to tell you, all about the game and what did you miss. And sometimes that, I think can be just as fulfilling to them as if you were there or close to it.
Well, with him, it could have been more like I've not seen him. I always say hi to him after the game, right? I mean, I've known him forever. He was in a different mood than he's ever been. And it could be because he couldn't wait to go tell his parents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so there could be some more aspect of that. I guess what we're getting at is that, we understand that some places are an hour and a half away. And we understand that sometimes they're late nights and sometimes money is an issue. Like these are all very relevant reasons to not go to a game. But if you can, the support that you're providing and is important. Like, so here, I'm going to throw it back to you about what you saw in a football game.
Oh, yeah. And I don't even know who it was because I don't know football or football people. But it was a professional football player and he was mic'd up for the game and the camera just kept going back to him and he's in the stands looking for his mom and he just keeps going, where's my mama? My mama's supposed to be here. Where's my mama? And he was so hung up on it. And then at the end of the little video, he sits down and he tells the player next to him, like, I found my mama. It was so sweet because it was like he was still like a little child that was happy that his mom came to his football game to watch him play.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't. Just a little more free with his emotions than maybe your 16-year-old is going to be. But at the same point, they want you there if at all possible. And if you do it enough, they will understand when you can't, right? So. Yeah.
And I wanted to touch on, you talked earlier about how, the kids just want you to be there. They're just there to have a good time and have fun. Made me think about how, and I hate to go back to baseball or softball, but that's just kind of my world. And I know for a fact people feel the same way in other sports. But like in baseball, softball, if your kid is pitching, like pitcher's mom is always known to be like just a hot mess, like a complete nervous wreck the second that you see your kid going out to the mound. And that's like at any level. I mean, even talking to, we've interviewed people whose kids pitch in the MLB. Like when your kid's pitching, you're a nervous wreck. And what I hear time and time again is the child, the one actually pitching, is always super offended that the moms get really nervous when they're pitching. You know what I mean? Because I think it's like they really just want us to be there and be their biggest fan and to just watch them and enjoy and have fun. Like they don't even get as nervous, I don't think, as we do. And so I think it just comes back to when you said, we just need to be there and support and be their fans and just like let them kind of check out and just enjoy watching and let them take the reins because that's all they want. They don't want us to take it that seriously.
And it's not that we're telling you not to be nervous because that's not how that works. Okay, right? It's not.
I haven't figured that out.
But it's going to go back to a statement I made before. We got to keep ourselves out of it, right? This is for them. Like our time is done, whether we played or didn't play. And I will sit there and watch a game. And I will have parents come up to me, and I don't get to sit and watch much, right? But like, how can you just sit there and watch? Because this is a parent who has high anxiety and walking around. It's like, well, it isn't easy, but it's not about me, right? And I kind of keep reminding myself, like, and whatever happens is going to be okay because it's just sports.
It's like a youth game. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. And
I put a star next to this because you said it's most likely a different topic for another day, and I think we will do that. But you have to remember, like, there's a small part of me that I do not want my kids to fail, but if they do fail, I know that it'll be okay because they'll learn from it. And that, I think, takes some of the anxiety away. I mean, I don't want them to, and obviously it would be very different if it was the last at-bat of the regional final or something of their senior year. Their senior year. You know what I mean? Like, holy crap, like that's a very big deal. But, with where we're at right now, losing a game because you struck out with the bases loaded is that's going to happen. That's the sport, right? You're going to miss a free throw. You're going to fumble a ball because that happens. Like that's where you learn, right? I mean, that's where you learn. You need to put more experience in, more practice, and that's how we learn to be resilient. And I think that's one of the most important aspects of what we get from sports.
Yeah, it's back to that whole saying, like there's no losing, there's winning, and there's learning. And your learning comes from losing
Failing.
more often.
Yeah,
failing.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up there. And so we don't know what episode 10 is going to be. Might be that. Might be another interview. Not exactly sure. I know I've been pretty happy to see the crowds that are at all these sports. Keep doing that. I think our kids are really, benefiting from that. But you're also like, well, why wouldn't I go? I'm a parent. Keep doing it. We just know you're appreciated. And, I'm happy to see, the excitement for what's happening in town. And as far as we're concerned here, you can follow us at The Tiger's Den.
Nope. It's Caro Tiger's Den.
Caro Tiger's Den.
Caro Tiger's Den is our handle for all social media. So for Instagram, Facebook, Twitter /X. And we did our very first TikTok video. So we are officially on TikTok. We plan on doing a few more.
Which was way more popular than we expected it to be. And so I guess we're going
to have to do some more videos formatted for TikTok. So yeah, we're working on that. So find us on TikTok if you're on TikTok, Caro Tiger's Den.
And at the current time, we try to do live updates of sporting events we're at on Twitter.
Yes, it's so much easier to do live updates on Twitter. So that's the place to be if you're like, hey, I couldn't make it to the football game today, but I wonder what's going on. Couldn't make it to whatever. See if we're covering that game. Live updates on Twitter. And then afterwards, we try to do, share a couple of clips or the final score or whatever on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Facebook tends to be that more global updates of the teams. Like, so soccer gives us the stats. We put those on there. And
if there's something else we need to be covering and we're not, like somebody recently reached out and said, hey, you should share with what Caro Equestrian Club is doing. That wasn't something we immediately knew about. We tracked down that information and are happy to share it. So just reach out to us and let us know.
Yep, absolutely. So for that, thanks, Diana. And we'll catch up with you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.